See, I want to ask you also about these Russian S-300 missiles, because they are not installed yet. Actually, Iran's got to buy them, so Iran's waiting for this $150 billion so they can buy these missiles that will protect the Iranian fields from any kind of an attack by anybody, which would mainly be Israel, of course. So talk to us a little bit about that situation.
Sure. If your listeners recall, about a year ago, the Russians had blown out of the sky with their weapon. They were called Buk-15s. They blew out of the sky a Malaysian aircraft that had left Amsterdam. They blew it out of the sky over eastern Ukraine. 300 innocent people were killed in that airplane disaster. It was an intentional act. The S-300s are on the order of the Buk Russian equipment that blew that commercial airliner out of the sky. The only difference is the S-300s are even more powerful. So the Russians have entered into agreements with the Iranians beginning last fall, both to build Iran about 15 new nuclear sites, nuclear reactors, but they also are going to sell the Iranians the S-300s, which are anti-aircraft, anti-missile devices, so that if the United States or if Israel tried to fly in over Iran and destroy nuclear hardware, we then would become targets of this very powerful S-300 system. In other words, it would be virtually impossible, if not completely impossible, for the United States or for Israel to destroy the nuclear hardware. That's what is so important to recognize. We not only are going to actively help Iran build nuclear hardware and bombs, we will be paying Iran to build the nuclear hardware and bombs, and we'll be allowing Iran to defend itself against attacks from America or Israel or any other nation to stop these madmen from their goal, which they say almost on a daily basis with crowds in Iran, death to America, death to Israel. And Jan, notice when the Iranian Ayatollah is speaking, he's shouting two nations' names that he wants to see defeated, annihilated, and killed. Israel and the United States. You don't hear shouting, death to Zimbabwe, death to Chad. You hear death to Israel, death to America. And for us to put the means of execution into the hands of Iran and to nearly pay them to do so is beyond madness, beyond any delusion that anyone could imagine.
Folks, if you'd like to hear more, we're talking to Michelle Bachmann. She will be one of my speakers at Understanding the Times 2015, October 2nd, 3rd, just outside of Minneapolis, Minnesota. We're going to be live streaming it. If you'd like to watch on your computer, you can do so for just $25. You'll have 30-day access, along with Dr. Robert Jeffress, Pastor Jack Hibbs, and Amir Sarfati, and we'll be talking about all sorts of things to help you better understand the times. But that begs the question, Michelle, and you actually talked to Benjamin Netanyahu back in 2012, and you encouraged him to bomb Iran. You encouraged him to do it spring of 2012. So what do you think, based on some of your intelligence information and things that you can't share? Obviously, there are things you aren't able to share. What do you think Israel would do? That's part one. Part two of that question is, do you think they're even capable? They're going to have help, and maybe be the Saudis, which is certainly a strange alliance, but we're in the end times. How do you think this could play out?
Well, Israel will have to have help, and Israel will do whatever Israel needs to do to survive, as they must. I want to make it very clear that I am not advocating starting a war or bombing the Iranian people, as opposed to Iran, which has poised literally in excess of 100,000, perhaps as many as 200,000 rockets against innocent Israeli civilians. They've placed those in northern Lebanon under the authority of Hezbollah, their proxy in southern Lebanon. What's important to recognize is that probably one of the greatest acts of peace that we could advocate would be for the bombing of Iranian nuclear hardware. That would be taking out the materials of execution that Iran wants to use to annihilate people in Israel and innocent civilians like us here in the United States. So wouldn't it make more sense for us to remove the weapons of war, weapons of mass destruction from madmen? That is what I was advocating that Prime Minister Netanyahu use in early 2012 when I thought it was the right time for him to remove the nuclear hardware, because I saw that President Obama, through the negotiations, would be strengthening Iran's hands. At this point, we are looking at making Iran a nuclear power and a menace not only to the Middle East, but a menace to the entire world. That is why, as I shared to you on a previous program, my last act as a member of Congress, speaking to President Obama in December of 2014, I urged President Obama personally in a private conversation with him at the White House to bomb the Iranian nuclear hardware. That is not starting World War III. The president says there is no alternative to his deal, which his deal ensures World War III. It ensures it because you've got an actor with a will who wants war, and he is putting nuclear weaponry, more than one bomb, in his hands. So he's ensuring World War III. I want to prevent World War III. The only way at this point that we could do that, we can't sweet talk the Iranians out of their nuclear ambitions. At this point, we have to remove the weapon of war, and that would be the sane use of our military equipment, which we do have the equipment that today could remove everything that we're aware of that they have for nuclear capability. Israel has capabilities, very strong capabilities, to remove, I believe, much of Iran's nuclear hardware. However, what I am concerned about is that President Obama has saber-rattled already toward Prime Minister Netanyahu. And I think that the signal that President Obama has said is that if Israel decides to go and themselves take out the nuclear hardware, my fear is that President Obama would interfere with that effort and perhaps prevent Israel from going forward and taking out Iran's nuclear hardware. Now, that's a complete turnaround for where the United States is. Think of what we're talking about. Yeah. We're talking about a prior Democrat president, Harry Truman, who stood for the Jewish state of Israel, who 11 minutes after Israel declared her sovereignty in May of 1948, that Democrat president said, "We are going to recognize you as a sovereign state, and we're going to have your back." Now we have a president, a Democrat president, who's completely flipped on Israel, and he's doing everything in his power to put weapons of mass destruction, the most lethal weapons known to man, in the hands of Israel's greatest enemy, Iran. And that enemy states, like I said, on a daily basis, they will use them to annihilate Israel. They're innocent civilians. And what I am advocating at this point, our option, the easiest, cleanest option, is to remove the nuclear hardware. The U.S. should do that today. We should do it in conjunction with Israel, with the Saudis, with the United Arab Emirates, with the Kuwaitis. We do have partners who would help us in that effort. We could get this done. I'm not advocating that we murder the Iranian people, but that we remove the nuclear hardware. We can do it. We should do it. That would prevent a World War III.